around around what's going on in our world, and how we as leaders can really be setting the tone and making sure that we are in conversation with each other and in community, and most importantly being safe, right? We have seen a rise in a lot of different a lot of violence and rhetoric and terror in our communities, and unfortunately we are not new to this, but it is something that we are called to confront in this moment. And so, as you continue to introduce yourselves in the chat, we're going to set some ground rules, make sure everyone knows that this is a safe space, and then we'll kick it off with some remarks from our leadership. So, greetings, everyone. My name is Phaedra Jackson. I am your Vice President of Unit Advocacy and Effectiveness, and our team will be supporting this call to make sure that, again, we are able to have important dialogue around keeping our community safe in these turbulent times. And so, I do want to start off with saying that this call is off the record. This is a confidential NAACP family discussion. So what's shared here stays here within the family. Press were not invited, and if anyone on this call identifies as press, we ask that you excuse yourselves now from the call. We're coming together in solidarity to support each other and our communities. All perspectives and questions are welcome when shared respectfully. And we want to assume positive intent when holding each other accountable for impact, right? So in our conversations and our questions and our rebuttals, we always want to come from a place of understanding. We will have time reserved for Q&A, and so the chat, as you can see, is blowing up with the thousands of you who are introducing yourselves, and it can be really difficult to capture and have a conversation in the chat. So we'll save that space for you all to be able to have a general dialogue. But when it comes to questions, please use the Q&A function for any questions during the presentation. We will answer them in real time, but we also have reserved time for dedicated Q&A to answer any questions that you have. We ask that folks please refrain from personal attacks or inflammatory language towards any participant or panelist. And these times are very turbulent, so you should avoid sharing sensitive information, addresses, personal details, specific protest locations, or just anything in general that might not need to be shared in such a large public setting. You can always direct message panelists. You can always email staff if there's something you want to work through with some specifics. But again, we have moderators who are moderating and monitoring the chat. We know that, a lot of times we'll have folks who infiltrate. I think they call them trolls. And so if there's inappropriate messages or language, you may be asked to leave or remove from the chat. But we know that mostly this is family, and we expect to have a good and important dialogue. And so we welcome you into this conversation, and we're excited to kick this off. And I think we are starting our conversation today with remarks from our leadership. And so I am going to pass the call over to my new Chief of Field, Mr. Dominic Whitehead, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Phaedra, for this opening. I hope folks can hear me. I am in transit. Good evening, NAACP, Dominic Whitehead, Chief of Field, and we are extremely excited to have well over 1,000 folks on this call this evening for this emergency all units call. As Phaedra said at the top of this call, we clearly know in this current moment, there's a lot of political violence happening. Much of that is coming from the current administration that we have in. And so the purpose of this call this evening, I hope folks can hear me. So team, let me know if anything is staticky or broken up. But the purpose of this call this evening is to ensure that NAACP is operating and moving as one NAACP, right? Ensuring that we are going through all of our safety protocols as it comes to protests, ensuring that we're reminding folks on what it is to fill out a direct action form, ensuring that we are lifting up clear talking points from our communications team on many of the things that we put out over the last few weeks, whether it is not inviting the President of the United States to our convention in Charlotte in a few weeks, whether it is the political violence that we saw in Minnesota this past weekend, whether it is the unlawful, if you will, immigration or ICE raids that are happening across the country, particularly in Los Angeles and many Black and brown cities that we're seeing across the country. We wanted to make sure that NAACP NAACP, our units, our volunteers, our leaders, our frontline leaders, our freedom fighters understand where we are as an association. Want to make sure that you all have the necessary tools and resources to communicate with folks in your communities, the folks that you all are representing and engaging and advocating for each and every day around that. So the call this evening will dive into that, right? And we'll talk with some of our partners this evening, as well as Phaedra mentioned a moment ago, to talk about how folks are plugging in and how folks are diving in this moment. So we ask folks this evening, as we're going through this call, make sure that we are paying close attention to not only the protocols and the safety protocols we have, but pay close attention to some of the talking points that our comms team is going to walk through. I'm been taught to pay close attention to the language and what our leadership, both our chair and vice chair, and ideally our president and CEO will be joining shortly, around where we are as NAACP in this moment. And be clear, we are not backing down in this moment, right? We are standing up in this moment, right? We're standing up for our communities and for all people, but we want to make sure in this moment that our units, our volunteers, our leaders on the ground are equipped and will be equipped with the necessary tools that each of you need to fight this fight that we're in terms of saving our democracy. So thank you, Phaedra, for the opening. I'll kick it back over to you around that. Looking forward to an amazing call this evening and looking forward to seeing all of the work that is happening across the country in the coming weeks.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for those remarks. And we will keep it going. I don't see President Johnson yet, and so I am going to pass the call over to our chairman, Mr. Leon Russell.
Thank you, Phaedra, and let me welcome everyone who has joined the call this evening. This is a call about the current environment. And when I say environment, I'm talking about not just our cultural environment, not just our legislative environment, but I'm talking about our safety environment, the environment that determines the integrity of the NAACP in general. We have to remember that we are the nation's oldest, largest civil rights and social justice advocacy agents. And it is within that context that we have to remember that when we speak truth to power, there will always be those who are not prepared to hear what we have to say. They're not prepared for the advocacy that we will engage in. And many people will not like what we have to say. And so we have to be prepared to deal with these things. It's important for us to understand that this is not a new thing. I'm old enough to remember in the NAACP when we had bomb threats and actual bombs placed in NAACP offices in Jacksonville, Florida, and in Georgia. I'm old enough to remember that Medgar Evers was gunned down on June 12, 1963 for his advocacy work because he chose to raise his voice on behalf of civil rights and social justice. But I'm also aware that we're living in a time when there seems to be greater license for not just violence, but for what some people have called retribution. And so as we talk about a safe environment and keeping yourself safe, it's important for you to also understand that you have to keep the organization safe. There are things that you need to do to protect yourself as you engage in advocacy, but there are things that you need to do institutionally to protect the institution itself. There are those who would use any little foible that a branch, a state conference, or other part of the organization might be exposed to in order to attempt to destroy this association. We need your voice to be strong, which means that we need your unit to be strong as well. That means that you are not just employing general safety protocols to protect your own security, but it means that you're doing things the right way, that you're following the rules, that you are engaging in NAACP advocacy and not in personal aggrandizement. It means that we are, in fact, working as one NAACP, and that as we see things, we report those things, we talk to each other, we talk in our state conferences about being safe, we talk in our branches, youth councils, college chapters about being safe and about doing things in the right way. It's important for us all to be aware that as we work to improve our society, to make this a more perfect union, there are those who don't want us to be part of that union. It is clear that there are those who are promoting division, that there are those who would want to see us fight amongst ourselves, that there are those who wait for us to expose ourselves, to take not just our voices away, but in some circumstances, who will threaten our very lives. And so this call is a serious call this evening. It's a challenge for us. It's a challenge I know we can meet, because when we work together, when we advocate together, when we fight together, we will win together and we will be safe together. And so I ask that you pay particular attention to every presentation this evening. Understand that these presentations are here for you and for your unit to ensure that your voice, number one, remains available, remains strong, and that you remain in place to do this very important work. And so I challenge you to be serious, to understand the threats, and to engage in advocacy in such a way that no one can really threaten our voice and our power. Phaedra?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will pass it over to Vice Chair Karen Boykin-Towns.
Good evening, NAACP family. Thank you so much for making time to join tonight's emergency all units call. We are seeing urgent threats unfolding in real time, and we must care because immigrants are being deported without due process, protests are being monitored and suppressed, elections we fought to secure are being undermined, and martial law is not theoretical, it's being quietly, or maybe not so quietly, operationalized. The moves we're seeing are not isolated policy decisions, they are intentional actions of executive overreach with clear racial undertones. This administration is wielding fear and military force to consolidate power and silence resistance. Now, we are sure that this is about whether our democracy survives for all of us, for all of us. And so tonight, we are here together to say that this is more than a crisis for one community, it's a signal flare for all of us. And so we stand together as one bold, united voice across this nation. And when we move in solidarity with purpose, intelligence, and unity, we can protect one another, we can amplify our message, and we can shape the future. So this is our moment. Let's be focused. Thank you so much. And I turn it back over to Phaedra.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair. And again, we thank you for this call to action and for this really strong announcement of where we're about to go. I do see that President Johnson has joined the call, and so I'm going to pass the mic back over to President Johnson for remarks.
Thank you, Phaedra, and great remarks, Vice Chair Wilkins-Town. You know, we are in the middle of a scenario where individuals will use our identity to advance an agenda that's against our interests. So when you think about immigration reform and what just took place in LA and in fact across the country with ICE, it is a tactic to distract from what's really taking place in Congress with the advancement of a piece of legislation to redefine the role of government and redistribute wealth. You know, you consider veterans who serve this country with distinction, they're going to find it more difficult to access their benefits. Individuals who paid into the tax system is going to find it more difficult to access their Social Security funds. Individuals who have matured and now are in need of Medicaid support after paying for the program are going to find it more difficult to either provide for our seniors in nursing homes or access medical benefits for critical health needs. All for the purpose of accelerating opportunity for the most wealthiest individuals, not only in this country, on the globe, and give a tax benefit to them as we accelerate the nation's debt. It is a strategy to distract from what's taking place. It is a strategy to distort the true nature of how they are trying to rob the American people of their dreams, their aspirations around what should be expected. As we speak now, this administration has done the most harm through policy violence to strip wealth from individuals who were gainfully employed by the federal government, either directly or through contracting, which completely undermines the quality of life for many citizens, Black and white. That has taken place in just over 200 days. It is the undermining of democracy. It is the denial of constitutional principle. It is the taking of the expectation that we fought hard for, and it's being done in a way in which our identity, race as a tool, is being used to distract majority of Americans. We represent 13% of the population, but of the 13%, we are the anchor of the moral reality of what this country should live up to in terms of aspirations, but we cannot do it alone. We also recognize if we take to the streets, it gives them justification to call for martial law. If we call for protests, it gives them justification to cause police and law enforcement violence against us. And so they are constantly trolling for opportunities to distract the American public away from the fact they are taking the benefits that we have fought hard for, that was put in place as far back as 1932 with New Deal policies. So as an organization, one, we will not be inviting the president to speak. Why? Because he's anti-democracy. He doesn't care about the rule of law, and he doesn't respect the Constitution. And we will not concede our platform for any individual, regardless of the title they hold, to do that. Two, he would use one's identity, i.e., what we've seen in Los Angeles this past weekend. I was in Los Angeles, and I promise you, I did not see the mob violence. I spoke at a demonstration with close to 2,000 people. There was no mob violence. In fact, what they kept showing on the news in a loop was incidents that took place outside of Las Vegas, Los Angeles, that they claim was in Angeles. And so we are in the middle of a narrative strategy to distract the American public, to use race or citizenship status to further a goal that will cause harm on all Americans. So as an organization, we must always stay focused on the outcome. We got to fight for democracy. We got to fight to protect the entitlement programs that are in place. And we have to always realize that we are in a game of chess, not checkers. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And we have to have the necessary discipline to realize when we speak, we got to speak in unison. But when we observe, we have to be patient enough to understand. Sometimes us speaking plays into that strategy, but more importantly, it is important for us as a collective community to continue to be the anchor for the moral majority of this country, to ensure that we fight to ensure democracy work for all, and to protect equal protection under the law for all citizens. That is the role of the NAACP. We should not apologize for it, and we must stay focused on that role. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Johnson, for that reminder that in this moment, we can't let these distractions get us off track. And so in the vein of staying focused, we thought it would be helpful to bring to the center some updates from different departments in the association on how to address some of the events that are arising. And so we will start with communications from our communications department, really leaning into our media strategy in this moment, guidance, and press engagement protocols. We think this is important because we know that it's not if but when these actions come into your community if they're not already there. And so we want to make sure you all are armed with the ability and the language to be able to have conversations with press, because we do want to make sure we're controlling the narrative in this moment. And so I'm going to invite up my colleague Dominic Hawkins to share information.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Phaedra. I appreciate you having me here. And hello, everyone. Good evening. If I could just share my screen, I'm just going to put in the request there. Okay, great. Just give me one moment and I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my see the cover slide there?
Yes.
Great, thank you, thank you. So again, good evening, everyone. I'm Dominic Hawkins, Vice President of Communications here at NAACP. And as the largest and most influential civil rights organization, communities and allies are going to be looking to NAACP for guidance. So tonight, we're going to discuss how we can leverage communications in light of the actions of this administration, and basically what's going on. As we heard earlier, this is an unprecedented moment, from threats against and even assassinations of elected officials to attacks on protesters and journalists, and the rise of state-sponsored hate crimes undertaken at the federal level. Our communities are experiencing violence, but we're also navigating fear, misinformation, and sort of heightened tension. So in moments like this, our presence matters, our strategy matters, and really our words matter. And so we're going to talk about two things. So first, the political violence and messaging and framework, the talking point, the media strategies, as well as some social media guidance, as Phaedra mentioned. And then also we're going to unpack a little bit the announcement that Trump would not be invited to attend the 116th convention in Charlotte next month, our official position around that, and some messaging in case you are asked and need to engage with media on that. So starting off with our media strategy, in general, history tells us that the pen is mightier than the sword, right? That thought and communication can be more influential than physical power at times. So in our case, our narrative that we have the power to tell our story through earned media like TV, radio, news, digital, social, text, emails, what have you. That is how we're going to be fighting back at this moment, by taking back our narrative and communicating on our own behalf, telling our own story. So our media strategy would have three goals. One, affirming community safety as a civil rights issue, right? So whenever there's political violence that threatens our communities, it's not just about security, it's about civil rights, it's about access, it's about survival. And we need to frame it as such. We need to not be distracted, as President Johnson said, by what's happening on over here. And so it's classic sleight of hand. They want to distract you with what's happening here, but in reality, they are working to reform the role of government. And so framing our conversations around a civil rights issue is the first goal. Secondly, calling for accountability without stoking fear. Right, there's enough fear mongering happening on the side of this administration. So we want to inform and inspire action, not provoke panic, and center calm, strength, and unity in our tone. And then lastly, position NAACP as a voice of clarity and unity and leadership in this moment, because people will be looking to us for guidance. And so whether it's a local incident, national, our units must speak with authority and grounded in our mission and our values. So how do we do that? Let's take a step back a little bit and review some message development and how we can create any message for any situation. So this is a tool I like to call message circle. And the center of the message is what we're talking about, the core issue. What is the one thing that you want to convey, whether it be through an interview or a social media post, whatever it is. And then surrounding that message is the problem. What's wrong with the world? What is the issue that we're seeing? Followed by the solution. How are we going to address that problem? Our solution doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist, and we need to be able to convey that. Finally, what is our vision? What does the world look like when our solution is implemented? So let's look at that in practice. This is not meant to be word for word messaging, because we all know messages work best when they're in your own voice. Rather, it is the substance of the message that should be conveyed in general. So at this moment, NAACP is a unifying force. Whenever there is instability and volatility in the world, and whenever there's political violence and instability, we know that we were built for moments like this, and we will continue to be deeply rooted in our mission to protect Black lives, preserve democracy, and be that conscious, and then promote community safety in our streets and at the ballot box and in the digital space, right? So we are that unifying voice and that champion for our communities. And we all know, we stated at the top of this call, we're facing a volatile political environment. That's the problem. There are threats of violence, both physical and verbal. Armed police are threatening protesters. Extremists can storm the Capitol building freely during January 6th, but protesters get attacked. That's a problem, a real world problem that we're seeing. And so these attacks we know are meant to intimidate our communities, suppress voices, and endanger our ability to advocate freely and safely. And as even though it may be one particular community, if it's the immigrant community, but there are Black immigrants, right? Or if it's the labor community, or if it's the LGBTQIA plus community, an attack on one is an attack on all of our communities, because you don't know who they're going to come for next, right? And so that is what I mean about being that unifying force. And on top of that, we know the media landscape right now, as President Johnson alluded to, is showing a different story than what the reality is. And so our solution to counter these threats, we have to leverage our narrative and emphasize community safety, right? And to do that, we're going to leverage social media, digital media, all of our tools, earned media, all of our tools to make sure that we are grounded in our values and informed by public safety. So whether that be through media engagement, social media engagement, and we're going to go over some social media guidance on the next slide, but some press protocols, right? Developing talking points, and designating spokespeople, and then also ensuring that we have our crisis communications on lock, right? Preparing statements ahead of time, using internal channels for rapid coordination, right? And so that's the world we envision, where our communities can feel safe and free from physical threats. And that's what we want to communicate and how we want to do it. And so looking at some social media guidance. So when you're on social media, I know it's extremely tempting to try to react to everything and to comment on what this administration is doing, what you're seeing, but make sure you're reacting and you're engaging on social media consciously. So do amplify safety resources that the NAACP has. Highlight local organizing and what we're doing for the community, and share verified information. So if it's just because someone shares it with you, doesn't mean it's true. Or on social media, if it's on Facebook or LinkedIn, whatever it is, do your own due diligence and ensure what you are sharing is rooted in fact, and so that you are not accidentally contributing to that mis and disinformation. Don't share graphic images where possible. I understand, this is emotional time, but just be wary about the content and the nature of the images that you're sharing. Do your best not to post or repost mis or disinformation, even if you're trying to clear something up and you're sharing an image that has been disproven. um, we've seen that time after time on social media, it's not necessarily the words that people are seeing, it's the content. So they might just skim right past your text and latch on to whatever image that you're sharing. And even if you're saying, hey, this is fake or this is not real, whatever it is. So avoid reposting mis and disinformation, but instead uplift stories of community strength and resilience. Spread the word about peaceful protests. Talk about what's actually happening in community. And as Phaedra mentioned at the top of the call, if there are trolls, don't engage with trolls. Block, report them, and just stay focused on delivering your messages that we talked about previously about centering NAACP as a unifying force. And you also want to don't escalate tense conversations, right? Because there will always be angry people online. There will always be people who want to comment or say something negative. Just simply don't engage. So in terms of press and media engagement, oops, sorry about that. In terms of press and media engagement, the goal here is to stay ready and be steady, right? And so the best time to prepare for a crisis is before one. The second best time is immediately when it starts. And so if there ever is an incident in your community, make sure you contact your state conference president to align on that support and messaging. Also, designate a media spokesperson. Not everyone needs to be talking to the media. So you should have a centralized person within your unit, your branch, your chapter, what have you. And if you're not that spokesperson, make sure you're redirecting all those media inquiries back to that appropriate contact, right? And so what can happen is when you have too many spokespeople is that the message can become uncoordinated and diluted. But we really want to make sure that it is rooted in fact and it's as polished and prepared as possible, as clear as possible whenever there is an incident and there are questions about, well, what is NAACP doing or what have you. So we want to just make sure you have one clear voice who's the media spokesperson. Also preparing talking points ahead of time, right? You always make sure that if you're going to an interview, do it, get prepared and focus on what's happening factually. And then lastly, centering community. We're not here to amplify the violence and talk about all the bad things that are happening. We want to, again, be that unifying force, center the healing, unity, justice, and really are advocating for change. So the next thing, we're going to shift gears a little bit and address some messaging and communications guidance around the decision not to invite President Trump to this convention. Again, as echoing President Johnson at the top of this call, the decision to forego an invitation for President Trump, it wasn't made lightly, nor was it made in the spirit of partnership, right? It reflects the association's unwavering commitment to protecting democratic principles and ensuring that our national convenings remain a safe and focused space for advancing urgent priorities for Black Americans, right? And advancing democracy. When we have a president who is not interested in advancing democracy and in fact wants to erode it, it becomes counterproductive to invite anyone with those kind of ideologies into this space who are not willing to listen to the people, to the American people. So we are not going to be giving a platform to authoritarianism. We will not allow our platform to be co-opted by those who are actively working to weaken democracy. So that is, again, that is the communications behind not inviting Trump to the convention. So let's unpack that a little bit. Going back to our core message that our message circle that we just reviewed, and I wanted to spend a little bit more time here because I keep seeing in the chats and really some questions as to why this decision was made. So I want to be very crystal clear about this: is that this is not about politicians; it's about principle, right? It's about not giving a platform to authoritarianism. And so we are nonpartisan, but we are obviously we're political. And so we're not allow our movement to be co-opted by those who want to weaken democracy. That is the main reason about that. And you also will get these talking points and messaging for both issues that we discussed after this call. So no need to take notes or anything like that. You'll get all of this. And so again, so the problem is again that we're seeing a president who has continued to undermine democracy, civil rights, by signing unconstitutional executive orders, undermining the very foundation of this government, of this country. So that is a major issue that has resulted us for the first time in 116 years not to welcome a sitting president. I believe we've had Reagan, Clinton, we invited Bush and other presidents in years past, but today we face a president who openly attacks democracy, and that is the reason why he's not being invited. So again, our convention is rooted in solidarity, where advocates can gather to advance democracy and fight for that future, while civil rights are being protected. So regardless, we remain committed to building that more perfect union, as Chair said, even when the President of the United States is not. So that's all I have for you to this evening. Are there any questions, please? I understand we'll have a designated questions section, and again, you can also email the communications inbox or me directly, and we'll be happy to discuss that. But I'll also be on for the Q&A portion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominic. And again, we just want to underscore how important it is that we really maintain our narrative and don't let other folks tell our story. So thank you for that strategy to be able to maneuver that. Now, as we move forward in the call, we know that there are lots of fights on the policy level, right? Like on the federal level, we are seeing attacks on all fronts. And so we're going to invite Patrice Willoughby from our Policy and Legislative Affairs Department to kind of give us an analysis of some of the federal actions, some of our legislative implications and opportunities, and some of our advocacy priorities in this moment. Patrice.
Thank you, Phaedra, and good evening, everyone. As you're aware, and President Johnson and everyone have stated, there are serious efforts underway right now that would undermine democracy. And that sounds like a very high level thing, but what does it really mean? Well, there are a lot of shifts that are going on in the demographics of the country. By the year 2044, the United States will be a majority minority country. And through decades of civil rights advocacy and action by the federal government, there have been infrastructure pieces put in place that have shored up civil rights and made it possible for Black Americans and other people of color to advance economically, socially, and in our leadership and participation in the United States. Next slide, please. So while these raids have been going on, there is action that is going on in the United States Congress. One of the best ways of diverting our attention away from some of the structural things that Congress is debating right now is to make people feel disempowered, have chaos, be sad, be afraid. But what is going on in Congress is really the underlying motivation of this administration. Many of you have been on our other budget and tax webinars, but you also saw when we put out our 2025, which was our response to Project 2025. What we see in the tax bill that's currently under debate are some of the financial underpinnings of Project 2025, as well as efforts to remove the policies and the programs within the federal government that have advanced civil rights throughout the decades. So a few weeks ago, the House of Representatives passed its bill out of the House along party lines, and that bill is now being debated in the Senate. But at the same time, there have been many activities that have happened in terms of Elon Musk as a distraction, Senate Republicans that have been very unhappy about some of the provisions of the bill. And what this administration does not want is for anyone to raise an objection. They want to pass this bill, and they had targeted July 4th as being the time frame in which to pass it. The House of Representatives, in its bill, passed a $715 billion reduction in Medicaid. It also published reductions in SNAP, a desire to eliminate the Department of Education and to eliminate 83,000 jobs from the Veterans Administration. Now, over the 4 years of the Biden Harris administration, legislation was passed that began to fund VA at the level that was needed to bring services to people who have served the United States. This administration, although they had a big parade this past weekend, they are really focused on clawing back that funding in order to disadvantage veterans. Veterans are also about 30% of the federal workforce. And so while their efforts are underway to reduce through the DOGE federal employment, there are also efforts underway for them to reduce some of the very most critical people who serve veterans and the social safety net supports that protect lower income and middle income families. In the tax bill that has been proposed in the House and which the Senate is now debating, there are a number of provisions that would be very damaging. The Medicaid proposal would take 4.8 million people off of Medicaid coverage. It would affect 17 million families by imposing additional red tape that would be required for them to claim the earned income tax credit. People would actually have to pre-certify, that is, say that their children are actually their children before they could claim the credit. And as you know, taxes are complicated enough. So people who have to go through additional hoops are unlikely to meet the requirements or just not to file for that benefit in the first place. Eligibility for the child tax credit would also be reduced, although the level of the child tax credit would increase. The funding for it would remove about 4.5 million families because both parents would have to have a Social Security number in order to claim the credit. There are provisions that would maintain the state and local tax income deduction at $10,000. Before 2017, that was a much larger deduction. And overall, the bill would add $2.8 trillion to the federal deficit. By imposing that type of stress on the federal budget and increasing the deficit, that means that the United States would have more debt and would have to pay more interest on that debt. That would put the country in a greater financial position, a more precarious financial position, so that there would be less money available to fund the services and programs that support lower income and middle income families. Next slide, please. This graph really illustrates what is going on in this tax bill in terms of its distributional effects. This is what's called a regressive tax. It harms low-income Americans while benefiting high-income Americans. And as you can see, it would raise after-tax income of the highest earning 10% of American households by 2.3% a year over the next 10 years. And it would deliver its biggest benefit to the top 0.1% of US households. At the same time, it would have a negative effect on lower income households. It would lower incomes for the poorest tenth of the population by 3.9%, which is about $1,600 per year per household. And that would mainly be by cutting federal spending on Medicaid, SNAP, food assistance programs, and other programs that benefit poor and working class families. So we've seen this game plan before. It's called trickle down economics. It became very popular during the Reagan administration, and Presidents Reagan, George W. Bush, and the first Trump administration really advocated for trickle down economics. This has never worked. It has always functioned to make the rich richer, and everyone else has fallen further behind. And that also increases the racial wealth gap, which is already far too large. This bill finances the tax cuts that it's giving to the wealthiest in our country by reducing benefits to lower income Americans. And the connection with immigration is even more insidious because immigrant families often pay Social Security taxes, but then are unable to actually claim Social Security. And there are multiple studies that show that immigrant communities contribute significantly to the economic life of the country. Next slide, please. Currently, about 30% of the US population doesn't even know about this tax bill. Of people who do know about the tax bill, 49% and a growing percentage than that view it unfavorably. About 21% of people view the bill favorably. So, one of the things that you can do is familiarize yourself with just the highest level understanding of what is going on with this tax bill, because this is the focus of this administration. This is what they are leaning into heavily. And by distracting us through arrests, detentions, ICE raids, calling the military into cities, not to mention the ongoing racial animus, threats, and disrespect. Now we have a war brewing in the Middle East, continued police misconduct, and the ongoing abuse of presidential authority. These are all things that create chaos, that create harm, and that also distract us from the very real work that we need to do to ensure that this bill, if it comes to pass, is as least damaging as possible, but to push back on it by raising objections with our elected officials. What we saw this past weekend is that over 5 million people, through their engagement peacefully, were able to really, in a joyful way, convey the values of democracy. And so we are framing our discussion. We want everyone to stay safe because, as we've discussed before, this is not the time to get engaged in conflict with trolls, but to really hunker down to understand what's at stake and understanding the key points of the movement of this tax bill in the country will also be another lever that can help people rest assured in their own pursuit of a more perfect union and in democracy for everyone. And now I'll turn it back over to Phaedra.
Thank you so much, Patrice, for just laying out for us very clearly that in this heightened state, there's a reason to this chaos. We've been saying this from the beginning. This chaos is intentional. It is meant to drain us, but also to distract us. So on the one hand, we have, these incidents in LA, and we have this federal overreach. On the other hand, we see that they are taking literally from our mouths, right? They're cutting benefits. They are taking away resources to our communities to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. And so as we make sure we're keeping our community safe and we're having our talking points and we're controlling our narrative, we've also got to keep our eye on the real ball, which is this tax bill that is going to gut the services that our communities and all communities really need. And so I thank you for lifting up that needle that we have to thread by making sure that we fight back and resist, but we also hold our electeds accountable. And so now We're going to move on to a conversation with our Office of General Counsel, Jeanette McCarthy Wallace and Anthony Ashton. And here we're going to talk about, our many of you are wanting to be on the front lines and engage either in as your unit or as individuals. And so we want to make sure you understand protocols on how you are engaging and understanding some of the legalities and ways to keep our branches and our units safe. And so I'm going to turn it over to the Office of General Counsel to make sure we have that conversation.
Thank you, Phaedra. Good evening, everyone. Before I start my remarks, I want to add a little context to what we're seeing. For me, this is particularly resonant. This is the face of an immigrant. I came here at the age of 9 so that my father could further his education, and we stayed for the opportunities. I am a proud immigrant and I am a proud American. The two are not mutually exclusive. And I can say that I was and am indeed fortunate that at the time I came to this country, I was welcomed. I was welcomed with open arms. I remember going to John F. Kennedy Airport, and the person that was processing us through the airport, he was of Irish descent, and he said, "Welcome to America." And I am really hopeful that we can turn back to that time when immigrants are celebrated and welcomed as an important fabric in the cloth that is called America. Okay, so tonight, I'd like to talk about direct actions, and my colleague, Anthony Ashton, will be talking about First Amendment protections. So the direct action I want to talk about is most commonly known, or the one that we know most commonly is the protest. And protests are a long-standing tool in our advocacy arsenal. So I want to say that the majority of protests across the country are peaceful. We have a long-standing emphasis at the NAACP of protesting injustices. Recently, we've seen there's been an uptick, unfortunately, in incidents of violence, and we want to make sure that you are all protected. Um, Examples of this, of these violent actions can be found in Virginia. A Virginia man was charged after intentionally driving his SUV into the No Kings protesters. An innocent bystander was shot and killed by some peacekeepers during a No Kings protest in Salt Lake City. And in LA, where I currently am, we saw police using tear gas, flashbangs on the No Kings protesters in downtown LA. This is truly disheartening. So we want to make sure in the Office of General Counsel that you are protected. So let's go over the procedure of how to obtain a direct action approval. So first, the unit should complete the direct action form. And in completing the form, you must include info on the necessary permits, whether they're marshals, anything dealing with signage. You send the form to the Office of General Counsel, and then we're asking that you send this request at least 15 business days prior to the event. Now, I know that would be that's the ideal situation, but there are times when we have to act a bit more quickly. I remember during the situation with the Freddie Gray riots where we had literally hours to approve our direct actions. And we did because that was important. So while we do advocate and we want you all to give us time, and 15 days does give us time to adequately process your direct action requests, we understand that they are emergencies. Recently, leadership made the determination that the $125 requirement for a certificate of insurance is no longer needed. National will take care of that. So let's go over some of the direct actions, do's and don'ts. So I'm a positive person, so I'm going to start with the do's. Do's. You must obtain written authorization from the President and CEO and the General Counsel before initiating, endorsing, or participating in any direct action on behalf of the association or any unit of the association. And That requirement is found in Article 2, Section 2A of the bylaws for units of the NAACP. I can tell you, I fly a lot, and they talk about in the unlikely event of a water landing. So I'm going to say, in the unlikely event that you do not get approval from the General Counsel and the President and CEO, we cannot protect you. There was a situation in one of our state conferences where there was a protest dealing with the Confederacy. Unfortunately, the protester did not get approval from the Office of General Counsel, and there was a very severe injury that happened, and that person was sued in their personal capacity. That's not a situation that any of us want to see you be in. So it is critically important that you get this approval. Now, prior to submitting your direct action request to the national office, you should obtain written approval from the state or state area president, obtain all necessary permits, comply with local and federal statutes, coordinate with law enforcement. It is also a good idea to appoint NAACP marshals and establish security protocols. Be as peaceful as you can, and if things should go awry, and you see that things are getting out of control, you must exit the protest as quickly as possible. Also, we ask that you identify and report any suspicious individuals or provocateurs. One of the things that NAACP, of Office of General Counsel, has been working on with our units is establishing a cadre of attorneys that will be on call. And these attorneys will not just be from the Office of General Counsel, but local attorneys that will be on call should there be arrests or should there be violent disturbances and you need the help of an attorney. So we are working closely with field and with our units on that. Now let's talk a little bit about the don'ts. Please, we urge you, do not support or engage in any protest, demonstration, or rally again without the written authorization of the President and CEO and the General Counsel's approval. That is critical. Do not engage or support in civil disturbances. Making a defamatory or inflammatory statement could subject you, but not just you, it could subject the NAACP to liability. We don't like that. So please don't do it. Now, this is very, very important, and I get a lot of questions about this, but we are asking you not to participate or support a boycott. Now, the policy is that you don't participate or support a boycott without the approval of the board of directors, the president and the CEO, and the general counsel. As a general counsel, I will tell you, it is a general practice that we do not recommend boycotts. There are other effective methods of advocacy. And so we urge you not to participate in a boycott. There are other ways to use your voice in terms of advocacy. And I know that has been something that has elicited a lot of concern. But one of the primary reasons for not participating in boycotts is because you subject yourself and the association to potentially strong claims of business interference. And I had to work with one of the colleges in I believe it was Ohio that participated in a boycott, and they got a $25 million business interference verdict against them. So we are trying our best to urge you to use your voices in a way that is appropriate and that will protect you from liability. Now, let's talk about civil disturbances. So civil disturbances are very different than protests. Civil disturbances are violent protests which lack constitutional protection. The NAACP does not condone civil disturbances and advises all units that they should not become engaged in such activity. Now, what happens if a peaceful demonstration becomes a civil disturbance? It is our strong recommendation that you are to immediately remove yourself and safely withdraw from the demonstration and clearly denounce the civil disturbance. So I'd like to say, first and foremost, be safe. We want you to be safe. We want you to use your voices, and we want you to be safe. Now, this goes without saying, obey the law. We're NAACPers, we are going to obey the law. Finally, beware of those at demonstrations who are there solely to cause trouble that could be blamed on peaceful protesters. Just because someone happens to be on the same side of the street as you doesn't mean they're on the same side as you. And I have to give credit for that quote to Anthony Ashton. And it's very resonant because to me, there are a lot of people who try to align themselves with the NAACP, and they do not have the same motives as we do. So you must be careful about that. So now I'd like to turn this presentation over to my colleague, Anthony Ashton, who will speak about First Amendment protections. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm because I want to be able to. I'm going to share this. See if you can see it. Let's see if you can see this. I don't know if you can see my screen or the screen that I had up. Maybe it's the wrong one.
You're good.
All right. Does it say First Amendment?
It says court. There is.
That it?
Yes, it says First Amendment.
Okay. All right. So I think that it's important that if we're going to talk about the First Amendment, that we know what the First Amendment actually says. All right. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That one seems to be something that this administration is fine with. Well, there are people who are both trying to establish religion, a particular religion, prohibit another type of religion. That's part of the First Amendment. But we want to talk about tonight, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. That's what these protests are. It is your constitutional right to assemble. It is your constitutional right to speak. It is your constitutional right to ask the government to change its policies. It is in the First Amendment. This is so important that they felt the need to make it first. So when you see someone who says, "Oh, I wish," well, you guys just need to be quiet. If you're protesting it because you don't love America, you're not really American. That is not true. Protesting, gathering, speaking is one of the most American things that you can do. And it is the only way that change will come about. Sitting silently while bad things happen to others and thinking, well, it's not happening to me. That's not going to do anything. The right to peaceably assemble, and by the way, this has been decided, it's in the Constitution, but it was decided long time ago. I chose a 1937 case where they talk about that it is a fundamental right and that it's related, and this peacefully assemble is related to free speech and the freedom of the press, and that it goes into every bit of American political institutions, and that it is a fundamental principle for liberty and justice. All right, as we know, we talked about this. There were 5 million people who showed up this past weekend to speak, or more than 5 million people. And yes, it was by and large a peaceful assembly. There were some incidents, and those are the things that we want to talk to you about as far as making sure that when you are speaking out, that you are doing it in such a way that it is still constitutionally protected. As we said, if it changes from a demonstration or protest into to civil unrest, to a civil disturbance, those are not constitutionally protected. Holding up signs and shouting your words, those things are constitutionally protected. Throwing rocks, throwing bricks, breaking windows. That is not constitutionally protected. And those are things that in many cases aren't done necessarily by the protesters. As we said, in some cases, there are people who show up for the sole purpose of causing problems at a protest so that it can be blamed on the rightful protesters. Something that we want you to be very careful about is spreading disinformation. Now, first of all, Jeanette talked about protected speech and things that aren't. Some of the things that aren't include defamation. So when you make a statement, Jeffrey Johnson is a blatant racist. He beats his family. He steals. Those things typically are not protected. Those things are typically defamatory. If you point out an individual and you say things about them that are either not true, or they may be true or may not be true, you don't really know one way or another, you open yourself up and you open the association up for a defamation claim if when you're doing it, you have cloaked yourself in with the NAACP. If it's done during an NAACP demonstration event, if when you're doing it, you're standing behind an NAACP seal, you're wearing NAACP garb, when you do that, the words that you say are going to inevitably be imputed to the association. So we ask that you speak very carefully, that you think about what you want to say before you say it. And that's whether you are publicly standing behind a microphone or you are doing something online. For some reason, there are people who think that posting things online is like the Wild West. You can say whatever you want, it doesn't matter. That is not true. As a matter of fact, what you've done there is you've actually created a written record of your defamatory statement. So we want you to think before you post. We want, it was said, I think by Dominic at the beginning of this, about engaging with trolls. No one has ever changed the mind of someone in an internet fight by just going after them over and over again. You are not going to change their mind. They do not want their mind changed. You are basically just getting into an argument and infuriating yourself literally with a stranger. All right, we're going to talk briefly about this and then we're going to close out for this part. There have been fake videos and AI chatbots that have been driving disinformation. And it used to be, who are you going to believe? You're going to believe me or you're going to believe your own eyes? Here's the problem now. Your own eyes, what you're seeing may not be true. There are videos out there that are simply not true. There are photos that are simply not true. There was a video of someone who was calling himself Bob and saying that he was a member of the National Guard who was supposedly recording himself in the tactics that they were taking during the course of these protests. There is no such person. It was all fake. Yes, there are ways of looking and being able to tell whether things are AI generated or whether they are real. But before you pass on any information, you need to make sure that it's correct. As an NAACP member, you are seen as a leader of your community. You are trusted, and you are to be seen as a trusted source of information. Make sure that you're not passing on, that you are passing on only accurate information. Beware of false images and videos. Verify before posting, liking, or sharing. And if there is a statement that you want to make, we have an entire comms department. Do not be afraid to say, here's a statement I would like to make. Can I run it by comms first to make sure that what you are saying, first of all, it is accurate. Secondly, that is also in keeping with the mission of the NAACP and the message of the NAACP. And I am done.
Thank you so much, Anthony and Office of General Counsel, for that outline. I was watching the chat as you all were talking, and so I did want to just clear up a couple of things for folks. We are definitely not telling you that you cannot protest. We are just saying that there are protocols, and should you engage as a unit and you are looking to host it, there are precautions that we need to take. You are welcome to enter into these spaces in your individual and your personal capacity, not representing the NAACP at any time, and we encourage you to do so, right? So I just wanted to clear that up. I do see a lot of dialogue around the boycott conversation as well, and I know that we have had this conversation on calls before. And I do want to say, you know, folks are saying, if we're not boycotting, what are we doing? Are we doing nothing? Absolutely not. Our team's going to drop in the chat a link to our consumer advisory. There are other things that you can do aside from boycotting, right? You can be very directed at where you decide to spend your money. That is the same as abstaining by being very intentional and saying, I'm going to spend my money where I am valued, where I see representation. And so the association about 4 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, created a consumer advisory, and that allows guidance, right, for where are the companies that have the same values or similar values as me, where can I put my dollars into those? So I would encourage you all to check out the consumer advisory, and to do your own research, right, and to really find those companies that share your values and put your money into those companies, as opposed to ones who have told us exactly how they feel about us, and how our money may or may not be welcome there. And so I did just want to address those two comments. And again, I do see many of the questions in the Q&A, and so we're going to burn through this second part so that we can get to your Q&A. And now we are moving actually into our partner spotlight. You know, we don't do this work in silo, and we work with communities. And we anchored this call in a reaction to all of the things that are happening in our communities that are making us unsafe, whether it is our neighbors being disappeared from ICE raids, or political violence taking the lives of elected leaders, or protesters being harassed on doing peaceful protests, right? All of this is connected. And so we wanted to invite our partners at SEIU, who have been on the front lines of this fight, to bring some conversation around what they're doing in this moment. And so it is my honor to introduce April Verrett. April is the SEIU president and a fighter for working people, a visionary leader at the forefront of building a modern-day labor movement that is anti-racist at its core. Having dedicated most of her career to helping workers build power throughout their unions, Verrett is driven by the conviction that unions give workers a platform to fight more than wages, benefits, and working conditions. Unions for All can help eradicate generational poverty, dismantle structural racism, strengthen our democracy, and generally improve workers' lives and communities. Originally from the south side of Chicago, Verrett was raised by her grandmother, a union steward for SEIU Local 46, who taught her the values of perseverance, collective action, and community. Verrett brings ambitious vision, courageous leadership, and life experience that fuels her unshakable belief in the power to make change when we come together across race. She has been a firm believer that our power comes from our diversity. It is my honor to welcome President April Verrett.
Thank you so much, Phaedra, for that overly kind and long introduction. And I want to thank everyone at the NAACP for inviting me to join you all, especially your esteemed chair and my friend, your president, Derek Johnson. And it says I'm Kairu Crimes. I'm not. I'm April Verrett, but it's all good. And, you know, I want you all to be able to get to your Q&A. So I'm not going to take up a lot of you all's time. I want to first really thank you all. The NAACP stood with SEIU and our members last week and raised your voices, along with other civil rights groups, in a letter to the president demanding the release of David Huerta. And because this moment is about more than David Huerta. Of course, Huerta is president of one of our SEIU locals and leads our SEIU California State Council. And he was arrested and detained for 72 hours because he was at a protest and he was watching the detention of workers in the Los Angeles garment district. And, and he was, taken and held in jail. And we stood up, you don't mess with us, right? And we stood up, actions all across the country on Monday in over 30 cities. The Free David Huerta in the raids hashtag had more than 34 million views. But we are saying this is not just about David Huerta. This is about the tens of thousands of immigrants who have been detained and who will be detained. It's about the millions of working people, right? We put these labels like immigrants on people, but we sometimes forget they are working people who, as you all have talked about during this call, contribute to our economy, right? They are parents, they are grandparents and aunts and uncles and children who simply want to go to work every day and take care of their families, but are living in absolute fear, right? Because of their status in this country, who just want to be able to have a pathway to a better life. And I don't know who can relate to that if it's not Black people, right? If it's not other people of color in this country who from our time on this continent have wanted our freedom, have wanted the ability to care for our families without fear of prosecution, who have, wanted to a pathway to a better life. And so it means a lot to us that the civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, have stood with us, calling out this tyranny, this terror for what it is. And we also know what it's like to have our communities over policed, right? And if we don't stand up against the militarization of our federal law enforcement, wreaking havoc in communities, going to grade school graduations. Like, can you imagine being there to watch your son or your daughter graduate from grade school and having to be afraid of being snatched away? And that is literally what's happening. And we know what it's like, right, to live in communities that are over policed, where we face people who are coming up literally in masks and hoods and snatching us off the streets without telling us why, where you taking me, what I did. This just is not American. It's not democratic. And it's up to us to help to put a stop to it. And I know a lot of folks are feeling like this ain't our issue. They chose this. It's our issue, y'all. Because if they are doing it to them, they are doing it to us. Because if we think they aren't taking Black immigrants, right, people who look like us off the street, at the same time they're abducting Latino immigrants, like, we're fooling ourselves. It may not be what's making the press, but Black immigrants are facing the same type of tyranny. And so it's important in this moment that we stand arm in arm with our sisters and brothers in all of the immigrant communities and call out this tyranny for what it is. And I'll say this, and I'll make my way to exit. It's not, I don't think, a coincidence that when this regime that's in the White House see their numbers slipping, feel like their backs are against the wall, that they're not going to get their bad bill passed, they pivot to immigration every single time, right? They pivot to it every single time. It is the one thing that they think they can use. It is their tool in their toolbox, right? They always want to pivot to it's them, right? It's those other people that's making your life what it is. It's not the fact that they are trying to pull off the largest theft to working people, to taxpayers, just to give, the wealthiest among us a free ride, right? While they snatch away healthcare from 80 billion people, while they take food literally out the mouths of children. And so they're trying to distract us with sending military force into neighborhoods to snatch up people, thinking we won't pay attention to them robbing us blind. And so let's stay vigilant. Let's be smart and strategic about how we lift our voices in this moment. And I look forward to seeing you all on the battlefield. You take good care. Thanks.
Thank you so much, President Verrett, for those empowering words and for the work that our labor partners at SEIU is doing. All right, y'all. So we want to make sure we're getting to those Q&A. I am going to invite my colleague and team member, Wisdom Cole, to come in and just give us some quick safety protocols for individuals, because we know that you all have, we've seen in the chat and the Q&A some questions about personal safety. So we talked about unit safety. We're going to talk about personal safety, and then we're going to dive into those questions and let you all go. So Wiz, take it away.
Thank you so much, Phaedra. Good evening, NAACP members, leaders, partners who are here tonight. Really appreciate you all sticking with us during this webinar, discussing really important information. As an organizer, as an activist, as someone who has been to a plethora of protests over the last decade, we know that going out in the streets can get really sticky. And it's important for us to recognize in this moment in time that the reason why we use protests is to fight back against violence, and the fight to save democracy, and the fight to save our nation, and the fight to ensure that there's justice and equality for all. And so we want to make sure that you understand the safety protocols for local action. You know, first, what to do before a protest, a rally, or a march. It's important that you understand that when you are at a protest, rally, or a march, and there are a plethora of people in the street or in the area, oftentimes what happens with the cell signals is that it gets really jammed up. And so it can be hard to send out messages, know where you are, download your maps. And so before you head to the protest, if you have the capability, download an offline map of the area. Know exactly where you're at, know exactly how to engage, where your exits are, where your entry routes are. It's important for you to know where you are so you can either get out or people can find you. And so before you even go to the protest, take time to download that map. Again, plan multiple entry and exit routes, right? As you are planning to attend the protest with your buddy, with your friend, with your squad, with your people, understand where the entry and exit routes. Oftentimes, a good protest, they give you the actual plan for the protest, the walk list, the march list, how to get in, how to get out, what time they're going to be starting, what time they're going to be finishing. And it's very calculated, right? It's not just oh, we're going to show up here and just get into some trouble. We're going to make sure that people are safe, that they're secure, and know exactly what they're doing in that moment in time. And so as you're getting ready to go for that, make sure you know those exit and entry routes. Choose a rally point in case of an emergency. Things do happen. You know, people get split up. Things may happen in the moment in time. You may connect with other people at the protest, at the rally. And so with the people that you have attended that rally or protest with, ensure that you are choosing a rally point in case of emergency. A really great tool that many organizers and activists use is Signal. Signal is really great for secure messaging. I've also heard WhatsApp is also good as well. And so using the Signal app to send secure messaging as you are planning back and forth. Make sure you are dressing for anonymity and protection. It's important for you to recognize that things can happen there. People may be taking pictures of you that you may not want to be out there. And so it's important for you to dress in anonymity and for protection. Disable fingerprint and face unlock, right? If perchance somebody gets a hold of your phone and is trying to unlock it using your face, you can disable that, ensuring that it's only connected to your code. Some activist guides will tell you to change your code to a 10-digit code for extra security, but recognizing that you can take that off for support as well. Set a strong phone password, right? Making sure that's something that people cannot get into, that people cannot access. You want to ensure that your passcode is strong. Last but not least, you want to back up your phone data, right? Any important information that you may have, use that to ensure that you are backing up that data. During the protest, you want to ensure that you don't post face of other protesters. I know it's become kind of commonplace to take photos to ensure that you're showing the people who are there, right? And I'm not saying that we're against that. We want to ensure that when you're out there, you're not taking or posting faces of other protesters. Take photos and videos without unlocking your phone. Again, majority of our phones have settings where you can take photos and videos without unlocking your phone. Third, you want to remove photos that are metadata before posting, screenshot, or use Signal, right? Again, using tactics to ensure that you are protecting yourself and your digital signature. You want to ask for a lawyer if you are approached by the police immediately if you're detained or arrested. Second, you want to ensure that you are staying calm and composed. You want to ensure that you are carrying your ID, and then you want to ensure that you are documenting any injuries and get to medical care as soon as possible. Again, happens is if you are approached by the police. Next slide. And last but not least, in the case that you are arrested, you want to immediately say, I won't speak without a lawyer. Again, if you are arrested, the first thing you should be saying is, I won't speak without a lawyer. If you are under the age of 18, you want to ask for your parent right away. It is very important that you ask for your parent right away. You want to know who to call ahead of time. Oftentimes, you'll see people write numbers on their arms, have a piece of paper in their pocket with phone numbers. Many of us have numbers memorized in our head. You want to know exactly who you are going to call right away if you are arrested. And lastly, only share your name and address, nothing else. You may be asked for other information. The only information that you need to share is your name and address. Next slide. So a couple things just to reiterate the points of an NAACP direct action. According to the NAACP bylaws, direct action is a method used to obtain the association's objective. This includes agitation, demonstrations, marches, economic sanctions, and other appropriate acts. The NAACP does not support boycotting or picketing due to the potential liability. No unit shall initiate, endorse, or participate in a direct action on behalf of the association or any unit of the association without the express written authorization of the president and CEO and general counsel. Again, our general counsel reiterated this earlier, but again, we want to ensure that you are getting the express authorization of the president and CEO and general counsel. Next slide. A couple things just to make sure that you are aware. I'll go by this really quickly, but the difference between an arrestable direct action versus a non-arrestable direct action. An arrestable direct action, these actions are considered red level and participants risk arrest. Some activists and members of the public and police may consider these methods to be violent. A non-arrestable direct action are non-violent, right? This includes civil disobedience, sit-ins, strikes, counter economics. Non-violent direct action can also be included in persuasion, such as speaking out on social media, non-cooperation, such as boycotts. If you're going to participate in a direct action on behalf of the association, this must be approved by the national office. Any demonstration that may suggest that the NAACP is leading or participating has to be approved by the national office. Next slide. Alrighty. I know we went over the direct action procedure, so we're going to go straight into the next slide. And I believe that has all of the contact information for all of our departments. We'll pass it back to you, Phaedra.
Thanks, Wisdom. And thanks, everyone, for hanging in there with us. All right, we're just going to dive into the questions and conversation. And while I have Wiz still highlighted with me, I'm going to kick this one to you because it's something we've been working on as a team. Brad says, our chapter is currently working on a town hall to raise awareness regarding what is happening to Mayor Roz Baraka and U.S. Rep. LaMonica McIver. We would like to include a representative from National. Can you give us guidance on how to do town halls? So Wiz, that's a softball for you.
Absolutely. Great question. That is exactly what we are asking you to do in this moment in time. It's important that we convene our people at the state and local level to ensure that we are getting accountability, that we are creating not just problems, but solutions to these issues that are happening. When it comes to national representation, just reach out to the advocacy team for further support. Either myself, Corey, or Phaedra will be at your availability to support in creating that town hall. We want to ensure that you are not only engaging with your locality, but also bringing in any relevant state agencies, congressional members to participate in this. Part of this process is ensuring that we are communicating about the budget cuts that are happening on the federal level and the impact that is happening to that locally. But in this particular situation, we want to ensure that we are connecting the dots from the local to state to the national when it comes to this issue. And so happy to support. We'll include our contact information in the chat if you'd like national support to be a part of it. And Justin just put in the membership email, and we'll also include the field and membership email as well.
Thank you, Wisdom. All right, I'm going to kick this question to our legal department. What is the difference between a boycott and a protest?
All right, this is Anthony Ashton. Hold on just a second. I'm going to say that the difference between a boycott and a protest, well, a boycott specifically has to deal with making a conscious decision and promoting the idea to not purchase from a certain vendor, whether that be a store, whether that be some type of service. That is a boycott. A protest can be any type of demonstration, but it is non-economic in largely in scope. So we're if you think about I'm going to give you a fictitious store. So we're not going to shop at X Market. That is a boycott. By depriving them of customers. That is the definition of a boycott. By the same token, if you are standing outside of X Market with picket signs trying to convince people not to go in, that is the equivalent of a boycott because you are trying to have an economic effect on the business. Whereas a protest, for example, those of us that went on this weekend, these rallies, they were not saying don't shop at any particular store, don't buy any particular product. It was, we have a message that we want to get out, and we are speaking about that message.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm gonna pull this question because I've seen it a couple times. Edward is asking, without divulging security and safety protocols, what is being done to ensure the safety of our leadership and attendees while attending the convention? I'll take a first bite at this, but then I'll invite any leadership to join in. We always have a safety team and safety protocol for all of our conventions. This year is not unlike any other year. And so we, of course, cannot share what those protocols are, but there is an entire team dedicated to your safety, making sure that there are numerous protocols to have security. We have a security team. You may never see them. You may never notice who they are, but they will be making sure that our convention is as secure as possible.
Phaedra,
yes, sir.
I'm going to be a little bit more expansive than you. We have a general security team, which is a large security team that's made up of professionals that protects our convention at all times. We have a specific security team that works with the Youth and College Division that specifically provides security for youth and college. We also work with local law enforcement officials. And particularly in Charlotte, you should know that the sheriff is a former member of our security team, and that we are coordinating all of our security activities with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. And so we will have plenty of security in Charlotte. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tyler, this question is for you. The question is, when can we start removing the president?
Thank you, Phaedra. Yeah, so all roads leading to 2028 for engagement and turnout, but I think it is more important than looking at removing the president. I think the question may have been particularly about procedural ways to remove the president. What we are talking about from the campaigns team is all things voter engagement for those local elections, those local offices, and also our congressional members. So for the campaigns team here, we are all things voter engagement and turnout. I've seen a few things in the chat around the toolkits that are available. So working with your state advocacy, our national advocacy team, your legal redress chairs, we have the committee structures in place to advocate and do this work in the right way. The bylaws establish how our committees are supposed to be working and how that work can be moved more efficiently. In order to remove the president and to get a new president, we need voter turnout, we need engagement, and we need education year round on these issues as to why they're so important and tying each of these back to the ballot box. Decisions that are being made are all affected at various levels of government. So I see this as us engaging year round. We want to make sure we have a better 2028. We've got to start today. We don't need to start later on. We've got to start today in engaging our communities.
Thanks, Tyler. All right, I know that we are over time, and so I'm just there. You all gave a lot of questions. We cannot answer them all, even if this entire call was dedicated to those questions. But what we will commit to is continuing this conversation, and we may host a series of these conversations as we build out more resources for you all. I'm going to send this question to Patrice. Patrice, this commenter says, I think President Johnson could ask President Trump for a meeting at the White House to discuss the issues that need addressing. Black, African American, and people of color have voted for Trump, and it is important to include their interests as well. I have seen times when President Trump changed direction with input. It would be important to make NAACP interest a priority with this president. I think the leadership of the NAACP has to actively engage with the current administration. It does seem political. Patrice, I know that you lead up our policy shop and have a lot of those conversations with the White House and with members of Congress, and so wanted to give you an opportunity to address that.
Sure. I would say that in any other administration, we have engaged. And in fact, during the first Trump presidency, we were in contact with the administration, as well as reached out prior to the last political convention, because we are nonpartisan. And we have had over 116 years, as the news release says. Every president has been invited to come to the NAACP convention. There are underlying policy drivers in this administration. The policy drivers that are present in Project 2025 are a recitation of the past over 60 years anti-equity and anti-democratic measures that really started when the 14th Amendment was enacted in the 19th century, 1870. So this administration worked in lockstep with the Heritage Foundation and others to publish Project 2025. They indicated that that was their game plan, and every action that they've taken reflects an ecosystem of folks that are, some of them are involved in, they just want the money. Some of them are nativist, some are white supremacists, and some are believe that this is a matter of competition, and so don't want to have continued progress of the Black community and other people of color. With that in mind, I always say, when people show you who they are, believe them. And so that is the foundation of why we have made the decisions that we have made, because this president has had a track record of not only not following through, but also engaging in untruths and consistent efforts to disadvantage, marginalize, and remove power from Black communities.
Thank you, Patrice. And with that, I know we did not answer all your questions, and I apologize. You all had literal hundreds of questions, but we will continue this dialogue. We will make that commitment to make sure that we continue this dialogue with you.